Hi guys, I'm Sid. Over the past 2 years, I've managed to destroy my dad's biggest dream, get married, become a father, and then get divorced. I've moved in with my best friend and I'm in a romantic relationship with him, while my dad refuses to even talk to me. Want to know how it happened? Well, my last year at school was extremely important for me. I was a quarterback on the school football team, and we'd been practicing really hard, because that year our games were being attended by scouts from different universities. So, just try to imagine how thrilled I was when after one of our last games of the season, one of those scout guys gave me his business card. This actually meant that he chose me to play for the college team that he represented. Moreover, for me, this was the only chance to get a higher education, because my dad didn't have enough money to pay for it. And at the same time, that was his only dream for me since I was a little kid. To celebrate this, my dad was so excited and proud of me that he decided to throw a barbecue party. So, that Saturday, our house was full of guests, including my best friend Eric and my girlfriend Susan, with whom I'd been in a relationship for more than a year. Eric was into boys, and I was okay with that. But for some strange reason, Susan didn't like him. So, whenever I began telling her something about Eric, she'd just go crazy and start an argument with me. That made me angry with her, and I began spending more time with Eric to distract myself. But then, I started developing this abnormal feeling toward him, different from what I felt toward my other male friends. And that began to scare the heck out of me. I mean, I didn't want to feel what I felt. Anyway, let's get back to that barbecue thing. Everything was going great, and at some point, I went upstairs to get my camera in order to take a few photos, and while I was there, Eric also came up. He told me that he had received an answer from the college he was trying to get into. He got accepted, and he wanted me to be the first one to know about it. I gave him a hug to congratulate him, but suddenly, Eric made an attempt to try to kiss me. Our lips had barely touched when I freaked out, pushed him off me, and yelled at him, telling him to leave my house and never ever talk to me again. But strangely, for myself, I felt that I actually wanted to kiss him back. When I went down to where my other guests were, apparently I looked puzzled, and even my hands were shaking and my forehead was wet from sweat. Susan rushed up to me and started touching my face as if she wanted to make sure that I wasn't getting sick or something. I took her hands in mine and looked straight in her eyes. I really cared about her and thought that she was so beautiful. But why on earth at that very moment did I want Eric to touch my face just like she did? That night I couldn't fall asleep. And it wasn't just because of my feelings, but also because I kicked my close friend out of my house. I started thinking that I had overreacted and that I had to apologize to him. So I got dressed and snuck outside through the window. I didn't want to let my dad know where I was going in the middle of the night. When I reached Eric's house, I called him on his cell and begged him to come outside to give me a chance to say how sorry I was. Luckily, he agreed, and in the next few minutes, we were already sitting on his porch next to each other. I don't know exactly how it happened, but as soon as I started my long apology speech, I couldn't help but talk about what I thought I felt toward Eric. He listened to me carefully, and then he said that there was only one way to check and see whether I was gay or not. We shared a glance, and then I closed my eyes. I felt that he was kissing me, and it was definitely not like when Susan kissed me. That time, I really had that tickling feeling in my belly and goosebumps on the back of my head. When we stopped kissing and I opened my eyes, my heart was beating really fast. I no longer had any doubts about whether I was into him. I was confused about my feelings, and I decided that it would be best if I broke things off with Susan. We agreed to meet at the park. When I saw her, she was standing near the children's playground and seemed very pensive. I didn't know how to sugarcoat this hard conversation, so I just walked right up to her. But even before I had time to open my mouth, she looked at me and I noticed that her eyes were full of tears. She said that she was pregnant. She snuggled up to my chest and began to sob silently. My whole world broke down at that moment. It felt like I was walking on a suspension bridge, but it suddenly broke, and now I was falling into the abyss. I was about to cry myself, because that was definitely not something that I was ready for. Of course, Susan was going to keep the baby, and that meant that I had to tell my dad that all his hopes that he placed on me were going to turn into dust. After that meeting in the park thing, I went straight to my dad's work at the car detailing station. He was busy with another car, and I couldn't see his face. But just as soon as I told him out loud that Susan was pregnant, he stopped his repair work and froze, standing with his back to me. I tried to say something else, but he cut me off and angrily told me to go home. That evening, he came home smelling like alcohol, and he didn't say a word to me. The next morning, he woke me up by telling me he'd gotten me a job at the same place he was working and that I had to start immediately. And I won't describe to you in detail how badly my conversation went with Eric about that. As soon as he heard that I didn't break off my relationship with her, while I was already into something serious with him, he just walked away, and I never saw him or talked to him after that. I was completely miserable, and I no longer had someone to share my thoughts with or hang out with. Susan was thinking that it was only her life that had been ruined, so she didn't really care about my suffering. And my dad? Well, even though now we were living and working together, he didn't really want to socialize with me like he used to. He was moody all the time, except for the times when he and Susan's parents would meet to discuss the upcoming wedding. You know, before she and her growing belly couldn't fit into a worthwhile wedding dress. Susan couldn't understand what exactly happened between Eric and I, to the point that I even asked another guy to be my best man. But apparently she saw that our rift kept torturing me and decided to try to cheer me up. Because when I was already in the church, in the room for the groom, and I was striving to tie my tie properly, somebody knocked on the door, and I saw Eric. For a couple of seconds, I just stood there like a stupid jerk, not knowing what to do or what to say. But then he smiled at me, and I felt, I don't know, relieved maybe? I was happy that at least he wasn't mad at me any longer. He came up to me and helped me with my tie, and he looked so handsome in his suit, and I missed him so much. And I knew that this was the last chance for me. So I kissed him. He kissed me back. And right at that moment, my dad entered the room. In the same second, we bounced off of each other, and Eric darted out of the room at the speed of light. But my dad definitely saw us kissing, and, of course, he understood everything. He rushed up to me so fast that I got ready for him to beat me. But instead, he grabbed me by the lapels and started furiously whispering everything that he thought about me into my ear. I felt completely worthless, and I was ready to literally sink underground, if only it would all stop. And then he insisted on me going to Susan and telling her the whole truth before the poor girl ruined her life, as he put it. I think at that moment, I no longer had any emotions inside me. All those occasions that happened with one single year made my life resemble a freak show. And when I saw Susan looking so good in that beautiful white dress, I finally understood that in this whole story, she was the one I had let down the most. When I finished my short speech, I thought that she had something called a nervous breakdown, because at first, she asked me to repeat that I had said that I was in love with a guy, like 6 times or so. Then she started laughing really hard, and then she started rushing around the room. When she finally stopped, she looked furious and decisive. She said that our wedding was going to happen as it was planned, no matter what, because she simply couldn't stand to have that huge disgrace. After the wedding, we moved in with Susan's parents, because my dad completely refused to have us in his house. I found a second job and worked as hard as I could. But I constantly kept feeling this enormous guilt for Susan and her parents and the coming baby. She didn't tell anybody, especially her parents, about my sexual orientation. And for them, we just acted as if we were a happy family. Well, in reality, she was sleeping in the bed, and I enjoyed sleeping on the floor. When my son Andrew was born, or rather 3 months afterward, Susan asked me for a divorce. She found a job, and as far as I knew, there was even some guy that she met. I totally understood her, and we separated, with no hard feelings for each other. I moved to the same city where Eric was studying. During that whole time, we had continued calling each other, and this time, we decided to try to officially be a couple. I pay alimony to Susan, and she lets me talk to my son twice a week via Skype call. And my dad? Well, I really hope that someday he'll find the strength to forgive me and accept me as I am.